Hello and welcome to the Ramen Profitable Podcast. My name is Atish Mazumdar and I'm here with my co-pilot, the great and powerful Chris Scott. And this is the podcast about testing out your ideas, taking your first steps, and really overcoming those obstacles on the way to entrepreneurship. Enjoy. So what's new, man? Thanks for coming and visiting the other day.
Yeah, no problem. I had a work gig up in Phoenix for a night. And so, it's nice to see you in person.
Yeah, it was good. This has been a purely digital relationship for a while now. So
for a very long time.
Good to remember that you're not a deep fake, that you're not like someone just like put your face on something. And
that's still debatable.
Yeah, still kind of debatable. But I mean, obviously now I know, but I was presuming yesterday. I was like, well, I sure hope he got home all right.
Yeah, I got home fine. It was a little later than I expected, but still.
Yeah.
It was a good drive. It's not that bad of a drive, Tucson to Phoenix. It's really not.
No, everyone gives it so much hate and stuff like that. But honestly, I find it to be the perfect amount of time because it's enough time. Like you can complete a full podcast basically in between Tucson to Phoenix,
right?
Which is exactly what it's good for. Or you can just listen to music, or you can listen to nothing. But it's like to be entertained by the stuff going on outside of your car windows. That I've never really understood in the first place because it's purely transitory for me.
I think that comes from a time when there weren't podcasts, and your only source of entertainment on a road trip was the radio or a cassette tape.
Oh, sure.
So being able to look out the window, I think, was something that was more valued in those easier times. But it's perfect because it's like you can get out of town and then put on the cruise control, listen to your whole podcast, turn off the podcast, and then you're back to having to concentrate on this crazy traffic that is Phoenix.
Yeah. I mean, in general, that's also the thing is that generally when I'm driving I'm making that drive, I'm going to Tucson when I'm time bound. Like I have to go to Tucson for something. I'm going to Tucson, which makes it much more simple because if you are time bound going to Phoenix, depending on what side of Phoenix you need to get to, it's like different times of the day, the different freeways are either really stacked or really not. And you would think it aligns perfectly with when people go into work and when people go out, but it doesn't. The 202 is arbitrarily full for reasons that no one can explain. The 51 doesn't really fill up ever, but that's because everyone just uses the 10 and the 202, and I have no idea. I obviously now I'm driving as little as possible, which is great because I'm like not going through any gas or anything. Like I have the same tank of gas that I had 3 weeks ago. It's great.
That is great.
Yeah, driving into Phoenix is a pain in the ass, whereas driving back home from Tucson, so it's like generally I'm doing that on like a Sunday morning or something like that. Easy.
Yeah, no problems. What about you? What's new with you?
Man, not a whole lot because it's not something I constantly want to keep bringing up on the podcast or like harping on, but I feel like we're looking down the barrel of another shutdown
right
here.
I agree. I think so as well.
Yeah, it's just, and for a while it looked like Arizona wasn't actually that bad because our escalation of cases wasn't really going as high as some of these other places on the West and East Coast and, somewhat exploding in the Midwest. But over the past week or so, it's been looking worse and worse here in Arizona. So unfortunately, that means that on top of the fact that my gym, so not my lifting gym, but my jiu-jitsu gym is moving because they own a space that's really, really large and was both a jiu-jitsu and a CrossFit gym. But now the business can't hold up the CrossFit side of it. So they're closing and they're going to be moving the gym over to a new location at the top of the year. So whether or not they're closing for the remainder of the year now, or if they're staying open a little bit, it's like it all kind of depends on what happens with the declaration, pandemic and everything. So which sucks from a sort of, I mean, it sucks from a workout and jiu-jitsu perspective in general. It also, I mean, definitely sucks for the owner because they were in this building that was so great. Now they have to like close down and move and basically reduce their operation size because of COVID.
Right.
But then even more so, just for my selfish and personal means, it sucks because that was where I was kind of doing like my quote unquote field testing for the nootropic blend. And now I don't have any place to do that. Or, I mean, and that's the thing. I could definitely start doing it in different modalities, like maybe running or like something else. Like I can do that. But again, that would be bringing it back down to just individual level testing. Whereas I was like hitting a good stride of doing things in the gym with multiple people, multiple different body sizes, because that was something that was kind of being shown to make a difference. Was that,
right.
I'm roughly 170 pounds, but pretty lean and just tall. Whereas it's like, okay, I want to make sure this stuff still kicks for somebody who's like, bigger body size, all that kind of stuff. So that I was really able to do that inside the confines of the jiu-jitsu gym. But now if they close for the remainder of the year, it kind of throws a wrench into my best laid plans.
Not a wrench. It's a roadblock. It's a speed hump. So it's just going to slow you down a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to slow me down. And honestly, I think that's maybe not the worst thing in the world. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other foundational stuff that I could be working on, such as, and again, I don't know if this is, this might be typical Atish maneuvering where I just like cram even more stuff into something that's simple. But, I've actually been fortunate enough to be completely healthy this entire time. Like, not only have I not gotten COVID, but also I haven't gotten sick. Like, I haven't even had a false flag where I was just like, oh, I'm run down, I feel crappy, let me go get a COVID test, and then it turns out negative, but I was just sick. I haven't been sick this whole time, and I've been COVID negative. I've gotten 4 COVID tests now.
I need to get a test. I feel like I should just go out and get one.
Well, if you don't feel bad right now, what I would do is just go get an antibody test, because then you'll at least find out if you already had it. And I think they're free if you donate blood. But donating blood is tricky in and of itself, because I think this is the first year where I'm actually eligible to donate blood, because it's the first year that I've had enough time since I got tattooed or enough time since I went to India. So
wow.
Yeah. So depending on, where you go on vacation or whatever, it's like you might not be eligible to give blood. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure I'm eligible to give blood. I should be doing that anyway. I think I'm O positive, one of the O bloods. So
right. We talked about this.
Yeah.
It's like,
so I should just do it. And if they give you a free antibodies test.
Yeah. I mean, there you go.
Yeah,
exactly. And then you can figure out if you had it or not, because I think what the latest was, and again, like, anybody listening should definitely go to some resource that's not me if you're interested in like COVID stuff, because I don't know. I basically know what cropped up in my news feed most recently, and that's basically the thing that like holds. Yeah. But from what I understand, if you got COVID, they're showing that you are immune to COVID basically for the next like between 6 to 9 months. So, if you find out that you had it, you're probably like fine for a little while. So it'd be worthwhile just to, donate blood, get a free antibodies test, find out if you had it or if you didn't, because also the idea is that even if you can get it in the future, if you've already had it and it hasn't mutated to a point where it's unrecognizable by your system, you're going to be way more acclimated to fighting it off than you would have been. So get yourself an antibody test. I got an antibody test way early on because I was naive enough to I thought a bunch of people around me got it, so I probably got it, and it came back negative. And then I've had 4 actual COVID tests, and they all came back negative. And I'm about to get another one because my parents are about to come here for Thanksgiving, so just to be sure.
Right.
But yeah. Oh, right. So how this pertains to Flow Roller, to what I was doing, I was kind of thinking it also wouldn't be very difficult for me to make a greens, like a health, immune support thing. And I was like, oh, I could build that into the product. But already I was having a hard time enough because I was trying to capsule everything, if you recall.
I do.
already the amount of, or the volume of substances that I was already using, predominantly, the lion's mane mushroom and all that kind of stuff, already was a hard enough time to get into the capsule. So now the idea, I was like, oh yeah, I could add like an immune health benefit to it, like, basic things that everybody needs. And some people get it through their diet, but most people don't. Vitamin C, zinc, and some B vitamins. Those are basically the things that, can't cure COVID or don't have anything to do with COVID really, but they have an immunosupporting function that may help you fight off basically the two parts of it, if the viral load isn't high enough and if your immune response is good enough. So I think that's really been what's been successful with me, is like a 3-part. Number one, that I'm, safe about it, that I keep my mask on, distance. I live like a monastic life where basically I work from home. I don't really see anybody, and I go to the gym and all that kind of stuff. But that, and then combined with the fact that I, in general, have good immune system health, and then combined with the fact that I must maybe have not encountered someone with COVID, but I find that kind of hard to believe. So I'm starting to believe more and more that just because my health is good, I'm able to fight or respond to COVID better.
Right.
But that might be a naive assumption.
Well, I don't know. It's one of those weird things where like you get comfortable and not being like getting too comfortable in the I don't know what I'm trying to say. But you know how like people get too comfortable with I'll never crash my bike while riding it, and then they crash the bike like a minute after that.
Right.
It's a confidence that just comes from not failing at all, or from not being exposed to the negative aspects of whatever you're talking about.
Right. Which could be a false sense in this example, could be a false sense of confidence because, I didn't think you could even get a DUI while riding a bike, but it turns out that you can. I've just never gotten a DUI while riding a bike. But
it's just like getting comfortable in that space of being like fearful, I think is a good thing for some aspects of life, but maybe not with a virus we don't know a lot about.
Yeah. So. That's fair. But basically what I'm reminding myself, or what I'm trying to do, is like, don't overcomplicate what I already have going on. Like, there's no sense in trying to like immediately be like, oh, okay, so testing is slowing because of COVID and all that kind of stuff. Maybe I should jam some more ingredients into this and call it an immune support thing as well. It's like,
or maybe it's not something you jam into it. Maybe it's a supplemental supplement.
Yeah, exactly. A supplemental supplement. Yeah, but it's completely separate. And so, but I caught myself yesterday having those thoughts and being like, oh yeah, I could definitely just jam that into. And it's like, why do this? Like, why overcomplicate it for myself?
Right, exactly. But it might be a good idea to figure out what other exercises, I guess. Maybe something like cycling or running or something like that could benefit from flow roll.
Yeah,
that you don't have to just test it yourself. Maybe you can give it to your same subjects, your lab rats.
But they're doing it independently on whatever.
See how do these types of exercises for a week on your own.
Yeah.
A week later, do it with the flow roll. See if you feel a difference.
Yeah, because again, it's all qualitative at this point. It's not any quantitative data. So there's no reason, that I need to be there monitoring it myself, because I'm a control freak. I feel that way, but that is probably not the case.
Right. And you can always like zoom in or FaceTime in and watch if you want to watch them do air jumps or whatever you have them do. But it's also be a good opportunity to take out the things that make people feel bad.
Yeah.
Or if they don't feel things at all, like to get that sense of levels.
Yeah. And see, that's kind of been one of the things that's really been the problem that I've been encountering that I haven't yet really figured out how to solve for. Because, for instance, take, what would be competing products, or take something that like is already established in the market, but for different, whatever. There's the really popular Onnit product called Alpha Brain, and it pretty much from what I understand, it's like everyone from somebody who there's somebody who I train with who's probably just shy of 200 pounds. And then there are also, females who are $120 or 100 pounds or something like that. And they all take the same dose and they all seem to be fine on it. Mm-hmm. And that is not the way this has been playing out for me.
Right.
So I don't know how to so you're right. Maybe that should be take this as an opportunity as opposed to, thinking like, oh, everything's going to shut down again, whatever. Maybe it's an opportunity to focus on a different side of it and see if I can like solve for those variables and that kind of stuff, as opposed to just looking at it like, oh, well, gyms are closing,
can't do anything, but
sucks. Yeah.
Everyone freeze. Don't do anything for 6 months or however long this is going to take. 2 months, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? Because last time, I think it was they were shutting everything down for 2 weeks.
Yeah. And it turned into months. Yeah.
Months. Yeah. So you're right. I mean, I guess the strategy here is to not just like fold to the unknown, but to actually, okay, these are the circumstances we find ourselves in. Why not pivot to something useful and make something of that, as opposed to just freezing completely.
For sure.
I'm into that. I think last week we were kind of touching a little bit about how we would want to promote Ramen Profitable, and you devised previously. I don't know if we've addressed this on this podcast or not, but you kind of built up this whole business plan for Elephant Scout at one point in time.
I did, yes.
That even it was complete with, I saw the PDF version, but I would imagine if it was like printed or like in a binder or something like that, it was complete with page numbers and it just like read through really professionally and stuff like that. And so I kind of wanted to figure out how we would go about marketing Ramen Profitable, or how are we going about promoting this and doing that. And I'm pretty poor, not poor, but like I'm pretty weak at the whole social media game, or the understanding how all these kind of different digital landscapes all kind of work together and what the best way to do that is. So I figured we could work through that together.
All right. So we want to establish a marketing strategy for Ramen Profitable.
Yes.
For our podcast that we have been doing this is our 19th episode.
Which weirdly, as I was researching this, that was one of the things, and it kind of makes me wonder if this is a chicken and egg sort of problem or something like that. Because as I was researching marketing for podcasts or how people promote podcasts, one of the things that I saw pretty regularly across it, like I was spending a lot of time on Reddit, but one of the things that I saw across was that they were saying like, oh, you want to make sure you have like a catalog of podcasts already. Like you want to have a number of episodes. So it kind of makes me wonder, it's like, how did that start? Because you're not meant to promote a podcast with only one episode, or like, oh, this is our first episode, time to push it, because then you don't have enough like content for people to work through and decide whether they like it or not, I presume. Is that the reason behind it, or what's that?
I think the idea of setting up like a mini catalog of episodes is to prove that you're worth sticking around for, or that you're worth the person you're planning on subscribing to speaks in a way that you understand and is providing the value that you're looking for at whatever moment of your business podcast search you're looking for,
or whatever it is, mind you. Yeah, but so I guess the idea then is to have quality content first before anything else.
I think the idea is it's hard to get people to hop on board with something that's like brand new and fresh.
Okay.
So if you only have one picture on your Instagram page, or someone has one picture on their Instagram page, are you going to subscribe or follow that page?
Mm-hmm. Probably not, because it could also just be that like, oh, they set up an account and they're never going to touch it again.
Right. Or it's probably a bot. This looks like a bot. This looks scammy. It looks scammy.
Yep.
So I think the idea is to, post at least 9 things when you first open your Instagram. So you're not just you're providing more context to what you're trying to provide to your audience that you're trying to build. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the purpose of having a mini catalog in your podcast platform, but as well as your social media, have a little bit of content to provide context to your persona, your brand, all that fun stuff.
Sure. So luckily, we already have that done.
We have 19 podcasts, or 18 podcasts technically.
Beautiful.
Soon to be 19.
Soon to be 19. This is number 19.
This will be number 19. So
How
I guess
meta.
A good one, Atish. Good one.
Yeah.
So I think first step for us is to kind of define our audience and figure out who we're trying to reach out to.
See, and this is the part where I get a little nervous because it's. Have you ever heard of this? I forget what his name is. I want to say it's like Trevor Wallace.
Oh, is he that comedian?
Yeah.
And he does like those dumb videos where he's like carrying in a park or something.
Yeah.
And he plays all the characters and.
Right, exactly. So he's that guy who does those videos that are like, and say what you will, but it's like he does those videos that are basically about certain slices of stereotypes of people, right? So like the way I found out about him was because he did this video about like what people who drink Bang are like, and whatever. And as somebody who drank Bang for a period of time when I was getting a whole lot more heart palpitations, I just wanted to see what that was about. But so he also has this video about entrepreneurs. And it's like that ultimately is our audience, right? Is young professionals or entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out how to navigate the difference between like basically what is the delta between employee to entrepreneur? Because that's you're already farther along in that, like you've been self-employed for, I don't know, like a decade.
It's don't put numbers to things.
I'm not trying to make a statement here.
For a while. Yeah, for sure.
I just mean you've been self-employed with your own business for a longer period of time. Whereas I'm kind of in this interesting space where I'm working on things individually in my spare time, but I'm still holding on to a full-time job, which is basically like if you look at the continuum, that's somewhere along the beginning, and eventually you phase out the routine work or you somehow get assets that are giving you passive income so that way all you do is so it's basically our audience is the people who want to learn how to navigate the delta between employee to entrepreneur. There's probably a better way to say that, but that's basically the way I interpret it. My concern with that is that if you watch the video, it's like it's all the people who write all the same stuff, right? Or they want to hustle or they want to, whatever, that kind of thing. And it becomes not only is it an interesting study on America's obsession with like productivity and working and all that kind of stuff, but also I find some of that stuff to be really, really not valueless, but kind of like empty advice.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's like really flashy. It's really vague and broad to kind of reach this really wide audience. And I feel like that the audience that those people are reaching out to, they're people that kind of don't have an employer. They're kind of just independently wealthy somehow, or they're at a phase in their life where they're kind of in between like graduating college and being on their own. And they have, a little help maybe from whomever or wherever they get their help from. And it's just becoming these people that they just all seem like they don't have, they all say they work, but I don't believe they actually work.
Right. Yeah. And that's sort of the thing that I wanted to make sure that we were kind of on a different, and I think that's the difference here, right? Is that I'm, because there are these like channels of that type that I really, really like, or at least I find really tolerable or something like that. There's that guy, Tom Billy, I don't know, whatever. I think he's Canadian. I'm not sure. But the point is like he already was this exceptionally successful businessman or whatever. And now he just runs a show where he has other like motivational or business leaders or something like that on. And they talk about like, and it's both good, but it also has this kind of after effect like, oh, it kind of has that Gary Vaynerchuk, you just got to execute over everything consistently every day, blah, 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 whatever. And then meanwhile, there are those of us who are still wondering, like, okay, how do I do taxes as a 1099, or how do I do you know what I mean? It's like there's a firm delta between, execute every day and outwork everyone and blah, 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 and then figuring out how you actually do that. You know what I mean? And so in defining our audience, I would say that, like, we do share a lot of the same audience with the Gary Vaynerchuks and the Tom, et cetera, and that kind of stuff. Because who would be our audience, right? Young entrepreneurial people who either have ideas for something or who want to work on their own kind of projects, or who are trying to figure out, who are trying to navigate, transitioning from being an employee to being an entrepreneur, or to being self-employed, at least.
Right. I think that's our audience. It's not
right.
It's not 100% what Gary V audience is. I feel like Gary V is very plays to people that have questions, but he doesn't allow people to question things. It's like, you just need to act. Why are you asking questions? It's like, do things.
Right.
And some people can't just give up everything and just start doing things.
Right.
They need to work 40 hours a week with an employer to transition to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of the thing. So I think that's kind of the interesting valley that we occupy, right? Because you have more philosophically minded podcasts or shows or something like that are more talking about the spirit of doing something. And then you have these channels, whether they're YouTube channels or podcasts or whatever, that actually step by step, whether they're cooking shows or whatever, walk you through what you need to do to get to your end product. I think that we sit at this, kind of, what is that called? A Venn diagram?
Yeah.
I think we sit in the middle of this kind of Venn diagram where it's like, look, we're looking at, generally younger people, but I don't think it's necessarily age restrictive. But I would say our audience is generally younger people who are making a transition from employee to entrepreneur, who are interested in both the philosophy of it, as in, sometimes we talk about how or why we would do something, but then they're also, interested in the specifics. Like, okay, how do I go about, making sure my product is valid or is blue ocean? How do I go about, collecting feedback, like our episode with Preston earlier that wasn't this month. I think that was last month.
Yeah.
How do we go about collecting feedback? How do we go about testing out names? How do we go about, whatever, split testing, A/B testing, whatever? There's more mechanical side to it, or like tactile side to it. So I think that's who our audience really is. It's like people who are a little unsure of steps forward, but are trying to kind of create their own thing.
I also think on top of that, it's the steps to be a goal that's not sell for $1 billion, create a business and sell for $1 billion. Like, we just want to get to a point where we can sustain our livability,
right?
Be ramen profitable. It's in the name, right? So the goals are not going to be extreme and huge. It's going to be, make $3,000 a month or whatever your ramen profitability margin is.
Yeah, which also comes with a fair amount more execution, I would say, because if you, and this may just be personal, but if it's like, look, if I'm looking to make $1 billion, I get so wrapped up in like, oh, what's $1 billion idea? And then you completely lose the side of it. That's like, no, this is completely all tangible and actionable. Just, oh, how do you form an LLC? How do you do it? You don't need to be trying to, disrupt the XYZ market in order to do that. It's actually a lot more. And that's something that I learned in creating this podcast. So I think that's the other part of it, right? Is that like people who are stuck entirely in their ideas or something like that, who are looking for something actionable. That's what this podcast is, because it's taking away the mystique of it, basically.
All right. So we've defined our audience here.
Yeah.
I guess now we need to figure out where do we find that audience? Where do those people live on the internet?
Yeah. Where does our audience live? and I think the easiest answer, I think that question in and of itself runs the risk naturally of being the misleading easy button, right? That it's like, where do they live? Oh, social media. We're going to post on social media, right?
Right.
But that's exactly that, and it seems so easy. That's what all of these platforms make it seem, is that it's like, oh yeah, just start posting stuff and you're good and be authentic and all this kind of stuff. Like, those are all the things that you read. But that's actually super not misleading. I think that would be the wrong thing to say, or not the most accurate thing to say, rather. But it might cause you to not be able to see the forest through the trees, because the accounts or the profiles or the whatever on social media that are doing really well and are performing probably share a lot of the characteristics with the BuzzFeed listicles that are telling you to just like be authentic and be yourself and all that kind of stuff, which is important. But they're also probably way more targeted and way more like specific than we might realize from the outside. On the outside, it looks like, oh, here's this guy who's like posting about, like, here he is working out in his whatever shorts, right? And that's
shorts.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just him working out, and he just like worked out on a Sunday and posted it. But there's actually a fair, I would imagine that there's actually a whole lot more to it. And you spoke to I think this was last episode as well. You spoke to a social media guru who was kind of walking you through that kind of stuff. But if we're trying to figure out where our audience really lives and all that kind of stuff, and you helped me on this on a previous episode as well, when we were talking about specifically flow roll. It was kind of more centered around like the psychology of it. It's like, how do they like to interact with you? How do they like to be, responded to and all that kind of stuff? And that made me realize that I really should have been working on Reddit. And that was the kind of forum that really worked for that. So if we're trying to establish, where our audience lives, so to speak, or how to get in contact with them, I think that the easy button is always to say social media. But as you've kind of pushed me into looking a little bit deeper, it kind of makes a lot of sense to really investigate, like, how do they respond? How do they actually engage? Because that's another buzzword that just goes on.
Right, exactly. So where can we actually have conversations with people that follow us, and where can we learn about success stories, or where can people ask us questions that we can address in future episodes?
Right. And that's, if we're talking about podcast, I think what naturally makes the most sense is actually YouTube. Because I can't even think of a mechanic. Like, I don't know how to leave personally, I actually don't know how to review a podcast. You know what I mean? Like,
it's weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes work.
It's because I just get on my podcast app of choice, whatever it is. I am in the podcast catalog that I'm trying to listen to, and I just click an episode, and maybe there's a star ranking in there somewhere, but I'd be hard pressed to figure out how to comment on it. And then, do I even know if my comments are going to the podcast? Because this is just some app. This isn't even like their specific app or their. So I feel like people don't engage on like the literal podcast app, like, or wherever they're listening to the podcast. So, okay. So they're not going to engage through there. Or if they do, maybe that's through iTunes. If people still leave iTunes reviews, I really don't know. Like, it just doesn't seem like that's turf. You know what I mean? Or that's valid. So then if I think about it, where do I see a lot of people who listen to podcasts, whether they be as big as, the Joe Rogan Experience, which is arguably the biggest podcast on the planet. But then even there are just some guys that run podcasts but also do video essays and stuff like that I follow, and that's basically how they get their engagement from their audience. Some of them even run Twitch streams, which I thought was just for video games, but it turns out it's not.
Yeah, Twitch is a thing I know nothing about, but it seems to be gaining popularity. Like, it's already popular.
Yeah, especially during coronavirus or during the pandemic, it blew up. And I thought it was specifically just for video games, or like people like, oh, here, you can watch me play this game and whatever. But it turns out it's for a lot of stuff. Like it's basically, here's where you can find me doing something live. Because that's basically the idea, is that if you're a subscriber, you can pay to it and whatever, and then they'll come out with this live content and you'll be watching with them and chatting with them interactively live. I don't see many podcasts doing that, because I don't think that that's the preferred like flow for people who listen to podcasts. I could be wrong.
Maybe not live, but I do see a lot of podcasts have a video element to it.
Exactly.
Like, it looks well produced. It looks like they're in a studio and they're talking for 3 hours.
Yep.
And they, someone's cutting between all the cameras and everybody there talking about Dave Chappelle on SNL,
Yeah.
So I do think YouTube is a good idea.
Yeah, that's basically, I mean, it's an enormous platform now. I mean, it has been for years, but B, it's like, at the end of the day, do you ever have that weird moment where you listen to somebody for a while? You've been listening to their podcast maybe for a little bit, or you tune into their segments or something like that, and then you watch a video with them and you're like, oh wow, I didn't think they looked that way, or I thought from their voice that they were
right.
Whatever. I think that's how you add another sort of dimension to your persona. Or to your, because somebody could tune in to just our podcast and hear us talking about Flow Roll or Elephant Scout, or, how we address, things that are going on in the pandemic or whatever. But there's another, I think it helps flush out the 360 degree person that you are by either having more segments on YouTube that would be, additional or auxiliary to the podcast, which becomes an option when you have a platform there. Or number two, if you're just hosting the podcast, but you see how somebody talks, how somebody expresses themselves, all this kind of stuff. There's I think they say, I forget what the quote is. It's one of those things like, oh, did you know you only use 10% of your brain, which is obviously not true. Yeah, not true. Damn it! The buck stops here. We're not doing that anymore.
We're not opening that can of worms again.
No. But there's a certain percentage of human communication that is nonverbal. Mm-hmm. So I think that adding in kind of, not only the idea of what you're saying, but also maybe how expressive you are, or passionate you are about it, or, whatever, there's probably a fair amount that goes into a video component that we don't even realize when it comes to podcasting. It just seems like the natural way to reach out to more audience members. Given that, with the podcast in and of itself, we have descriptions, we tag it with stuff, it goes through the podcast app, with enough engagement on there, I presume it says, oh, you like this, which is in that category. So if I had to think of like entrepreneurial podcast or something like that, oh, you like this, you'll probably also like Ramen Profitable. So you might get a suggestion through there. Right. But I think it's a whole lot easier to do that by being on YouTube or some video format that allows people to really kind of like get to know you and then connect with your content in that way. Mm-hmm. And the comments section in YouTube is always crazy. So
yeah, that's always fun.
That's how we would get engagement, really. It's like, I think that's where our audience lives. Young, entrepreneurial, whatever. They're on YouTube. I think that's where they live.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think we might have some traction on Instagram.
Okay.
I do think it might be a little bit of work, maybe something we don't do at the beginning, but I do think at some point we could probably gain some traction on Instagram with some shareable graphics.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen those things, but we'd have to make our own and put our own twist on it.
Right. And that's sort of the thing. I think that's a good idea, because if I'm being completely honest, there are 2 accounts that I follow that just do that. Like, that's all they do, right? But it's like, for some reason, I don't know how I found this account, but I basically found this account that just pulls out quotes from Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and like, that's the account. So it's like this, and that's the thing. I follow, and it's like, I'm constantly double tapping because I read that, because it's always early in the morning. Like, they know who their audience. That's an interesting study, because it's such a simple account, right? But they must know something about who their followership is, because they, or maybe maybe my Instagram just personalizes to the way that I work. It's hard for me to understand which side of the algorithm this is on. But every time it's, 4:30 in the morning, I'm up getting ready to go to the gym, and there's a quote from Sun Tzu's Art of War about being prepared or being whatever. So it's like the timing that they post also, like they really know who their audience is. Like, oh, who are the dipshits who are into reading The Art of War and want to see it every day?
Right.
So similarly, I think you're right that, you can get a fair amount of engagement and also learn something about your followership or your listenership in this case. And specifically, if we were able to make that content really unique and our own, I think that has a firm pillar in this plan as well.
For sure. I do think at some point we should tackle that, but maybe not right away.
Yeah.
Maybe let's focus on YouTube for a minute.
Yeah, and kind of get in the flow of how we're doing that. But I think you're totally right. Like I'd be interested to see how that would drive a different sort of engagement. The same kind of way I'm interested in YouTube is that I'd be interested to see how comments would work in that case, or how sharing anything works, because with one of the facets of Instagram specifically is that if you people are able to just with a single click and just share images with one another,
right,
like that simply. So it's like there's a fair amount of stuff that, if you are doing content that resonates with other people or makes them, whatever, it's like the amount of German Shepherd pictures that I send out to a bunch of other people is ridiculous, right? So there's a communication effort there that could really help, and I think I'd be really interested in figuring that out. So essentially what you're saying is, once you figure out where your audience lives, and in this case we're kind of feeling YouTube and Instagram, then it's curating content for them. Is that would you say that's step 3, or am I getting ahead of myself here?
No, I think step 3 would definitely be establish a schedule of some sort. So we release this podcast every Monday. So Monday morning at 8 a.m. this podcast is released. How are we going to supplement the podcast? How many times do we want to post on YouTube? This podcast gets posted on YouTube with just the logo. But do we want to supplement that with video, with the two of us talking, so people can complete that 360 image of us?
Right.
Do we want to take quotes from today's episode and make a graphic out of it to post on Instagram? Mm-hmm. But what does that graphic look like? What do we, who's doing that? Who's doing that work? Yeah. And how often are we doing it?
Yeah. Yeah, because there's something that, anytime I'm looking at how to have a successful Instagram profile, how to have a good YouTube, how to have whatever, the number one thing that you see across the board, it doesn't even matter which modality, is consistency.
Yeah.
100%. Like that is the, and to a degree, that's also, like, you'd think I'd be better about this because I've personally seen the benefits of being consistent, right? It's like I went from doing boxing workouts twice a week and just sucking air the whole time and just being terrible at it, to then when I was consistent and all of a sudden I'm going every day and I feel good and it doesn't take as much energy and blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. It's like, yes, that obviously is the key. So, driving a responsive audience and kind of growing and having people share your content and all that kind of stuff, you have to be reliable. They have to know where to get your stuff and when they can get your stuff. It's like, and that's, again, I think that really helps with, or rather that's another asset that kind of YouTube really shows, which is that not only can you see previews for people's videos coming out, like it'll say, and I don't really know the internal mechanics. You would probably know more about how this works, but they have video, what is that called? Where it's just the picture?
Sure. At the beginning of it, like a thumbnail?
Thumbnail, thank you.
Yeah.
So they have just the thumbnail of what the video is, and it'll say oh, this is, released next Friday or something like that. It's you can upload stuff that'll tell people that you're releasing stuff, and then once you get into it, that is, it's every Friday, it's this, whatever. It kind of, that drives me coming back to it, because now I know every time this podcast is released, which is in the one I'm thinking of, it's Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And I only learned that because I went to their YouTube page, saw that it was releasing Wednesday, and now I'm there every Wednesday morning. So I think we learned, or I learned it from the man himself, Mr. Matt Snap, who's a beverage director of Fox Restaurants, but he said consistency equals craveability.
Consistency equals craveability.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
He was specifically referring to drinks, but I think it makes sense.
It makes sense for everything, right?
Yeah. It's that, look, you go to this bar, you get a margarita that just knocks your socks off, right? If they make that same margarita, the next time you order it and it still knocks your socks off, then every time you're at your house or you're coming off of work or something like that and you think like, man, I could really go for a margarita. Where's the place you're going to go for it?
I think that's why Starbucks got so popular. It's because they made all of their coffees the same.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's going to taste the same in Tucson as it does in Flagstaff, or as it does in San Francisco, or as it does in Missoula, Montana,
Yeah, exactly. The variability, it's a good product in and of itself. It's packaged very nicely. The stores are always clean. The stores are always, they always smell good. They always, have some kind of like Nora Jones playing or some shit. I don't know.
Right.
And it's the same product everywhere you go. You can be driving from Tucson to Phoenix to Flagstaff to Vegas to, whatever, and you're going to get the same good quality product the whole way through. So in reflection to our podcast, what that means is, we're already releasing the podcast every week on the same week.
Right.
We've built up this catalog that people can now source through a little bit and get to know us. But now also when we're kind of building our outreach and we're trying to build our audience and we're trying to market towards people and expand our audience, well, we need to be consistent about that too. And we need to make sure that people know where to get our stuff and when to get our stuff. And then, just keep, and that's then the emphasis on quality content is, keep the quality up, make sure that you're putting out the same quality content that you were a month ago when you didn't have all these auxiliary priorities, and you're good to go.
Right. So I do think we need to come up with a schedule of how often do we want to post on all these platforms.
Yeah. I
think you're right. We have Mondays for sure for the podcast.
Yeah.
Do we want to do 3 times a week? Do we want to? I did 5 times or every week, every day on Elephant Scout for a couple of months.
Oh wow! How was
and
that?
it was tough. It was tough, but I had someone helping me, and the way we did it to where it was easier is that we picked a day to really curate all the content, and then we scheduled it out. So we had a platform. It was called Social Pilot, where you can schedule your posts and write all your comments, you can write your descriptions. You can get that all written and upload your pictures and everything, and then it just posts for you. Or it sets it up in a way to where you post it at the same time every day, whatever you schedule it to do.
Which makes consistency a whole lot more easy.
Right. But it's something we can do with even like a Google Calendar or a Todoist. You can schedule those posts and put alarms on it.
Yeah.
We just got to pick a day to sit down and really curate our content.
Right.
Pick our quotes, find our Art of War quotes.
Exactly. And find our Art of War quotes. And that's sort of the thing. It's like, it would have been very easy, I think, to get that kind of a potent effect between consistency and then also as a result of that craveability. Like, for instance, we had Preston on the podcast. Wouldn't it be great if we had some kind of image to share or something like that was like, here's Preston. You might know him from all these different things. He's also behind the new board game Merge Words or whatever. Like, so not only are we plugging him, but also we're saying, hey, coming up this, I think that's a tool as old as time, so to speak, because that's what TV shows back when not everything was streaming, right? They'd be like, oh, next week on The Practice or whatever. Or whatever people watched back then. Maybe The Practice. It was a pretty popular show. Anyways, but it'd be like, oh, next week. And then you get like this little flash of what's coming next week. I think that's one of those things that, building into our schedule is not only announcing the release of the podcast or the quotes from the podcast or something like that, but it's like, if we got somehow ahead of the game as well, and announced what was next on the podcast, which that of course will create, like, we need to have some forwards and backwards feedback loops there, because I think it's really easy to do that with guests. Because you're saying, oh, we're having this guest on, whatever. It's a whole lot harder to do that with a podcast where, like, for instance, if we don't have a guest, and like today we're working on marketing plans and stuff like that, we would have to be very regimented about our content that we are going to engage on weekly, even though we haven't done it yet, but we know what we're talking about, and we know what we're, that sort of thing.
Right.
So I think you're right. It's like, so that's kind of what curating your content refers to, is not only like setting up a schedule, but also being very mindful and being very tactical about it.
Well, I think curate your content might be the next step. So, you make your schedule of how often you want to post, so you know how much time you need to commit and how much you need to really create. And then you could kind of see how much, if you can't do 7 days a week, if you can do once a week, that's fine, as long as it's a quality content. But just knowing yourself and your schedule and what you can do, you don't have to go 100% on all these platforms all the time. You can do a little bit, and it's going to be gradual growth with this marketing plan. It's not going to be instantaneous. It's going to take months. It's probably going to take a year to build a decent audience. So just establishing a schedule that's actually doable, that you can stick to create that consistency, I think is part of this marketing plan. And then once you curate your content, you can really see if you can grow or if you need to shrink a little bit in your creations and your curating. Yeah.
Okay. So the first step is to kind of establish a cadence that works for you, or not the first step rather, but in this case, the third step. You're creating a cadence that really works for you. You're understanding, therefore, once you're creating this cadence, how much, and I presume that this involves a fair amount of testing, right? Like at first you think that like 5 days a week is going to be good. So you're like, all right, cool. Let me do 5 days a week. You find out that, the first posts were doing really well, but then by the middle of the week, no one gave a shit because there was so much volume going out. And also I'm strapped for time, blah, blah, blah. So then you figure out that you can dial it back. I presume these things are pretty plastic, right? Like nothing's set in stone
Nothing's ever set in stone, but once you actually get that schedule rolling, I think that's when you should start setting things in stone.
So, I mean, I guess that wouldn't necessarily be a step, but not bailing is
not bailing is why you create the schedule. So you kind of, what you're signing up for.
Right.
And you're not just constantly facing that blank feed with nothing on it and just that need to fill it in immediately with everything. It's like, no, I only need to post something on Wednesday. I don't have to worry about it today.
Right.
Like I'll be fine. So it's easier to commit to and not bail on, hopefully.
Yeah. Once, anytime anything's, whether it's a diet plan, whether it's, a workout regimen, whether it's a schedule that you make yourself for the day. And that's why Todoist had such a big impact on me. And if you want to learn more about Todoist, I think it was 2 episodes ago, go find our episode about Todoist and listen to our review of the app. But that's why I basically changed that. That's exactly why. Once I listed everything out, and once I know what tomorrow is going to look like, because at the end of the day I can review and say like, oh, these are all the things I didn't get done, therefore these are the first things that I'm going to do tomorrow. It makes sure that I'm holding myself accountable to doing so. So similarly, oh man, I'm going to set up a Todoist for the podcast. It's gonna be great.
It's going to be great.
Ugh.
But in the curating part, what kind of posts do you want to be making every week? So let's say you decide to post twice a week. Is it a video and a podcast? Is it a quote image on Instagram and then a video and a podcast? Are you sharing things on your story from other feeds that you like? Are you going on, are we doing like vlogs? Are we going to do a vlog on how we're actually doing our action steps with whatever we've talked about that week? Or we can be like, oh, today I did this with my flow roll. I came up with a new name and it's way better.
Yeah, man, I wish that was somewhere in my recent history, because that hasn't been the case. Yeah, and again, then that's additional, content that goes into the YouTube, so then we're diversifying essentially our channel and making it more well-rounded, making more, whatever. I think, and correct me if I'm incorrect, but this is where that kind of backwards and forwards feedback comes from, defining your audience, and then, which is step one, and then step two, figuring out where your audience lives and where they engages, is because that would inform how you want to communicate them, or now that we're curating content, that's basically the backbone of that, is that, we already understand that, a lot of our community, because of the specific types and demographics that they represent, we already know that they exist on Instagram and on YouTube, as well as like Twitch and some other things like that. So now I know already those are the things that I would want to be driving towards in my curated content.
Right.
So given that, I mean, specifically referring to the podcast, I think the natural takeaway, and I think that this works both before release of the pod. See, we have a very tight window where we record and then we post, or record and then the podcast goes up, right?
Right.
So that's a pretty narrow window. So I don't know if it works necessarily, but I think the quote posts basically that we're talking about, I think those work both before the podcast is released, but then also after.
Oh, of course. Because those podcasts are going to live on the platform forever.
Right.
So they can always reference that podcast no matter what.
Right, exactly. And sometimes, you'll never know. I think that's where also maybe having this quality content back catalog can also be really helpful, because if we go back and we listen to episode 3, 4, whatever, there might be something said in that specifically relates to some current event. Like you never know when that's going to crop up, and when you can back reference an episode by doing a quote post about it. Mm-hmm. So I think that would really, I really like the idea with that. Like you said, it might take some time to develop, the cadence of how we're doing that. But I think that's a really good way of how we reach out to more people via Instagram. You know way more about the algorithms and stuff like that than I do.
I don't think we need to worry about the algorithms, but with like everything about social media, it's about the engagement that you've talked about. But yeah, so creating quote posts and talking with their audience and listening to what they're saying and what they engage with and what they don't engage with is all about curating your content.
Right. So and I think that's the other part, that I was going to say that I think is a real strong option that we've sort of talked about for this podcast is mini episodes. Mm-hmm. Because the mini episodes are a little bit less information dense, and kind of more like loose conversations. Eventually, once we develop more of an audience, that can even specifically be about relating backwards with our audience or something. If we could like talk about like, here are our, here's a quick mini episode about, we had a lot of reactions to our episode about, in this case, building a marketing plan. Here's what some of our feedback look like. And then we can actually be engaging with our audience on the show while creating mini episodes, creating more content. It kind of, it all sort of works together. So I think, quote posts and then mini episodes to YouTube, or more content to YouTube to funnel people to the long form podcast. I really think those are the two strong things that we have working for us.
Yeah, same here.
Or we could have working for us. Okay, so let me make sure I've got this right so far. So to recap, the first step, or the first thing, is to be making quality content. Like that already has to be kind of taking precedence, because otherwise you don't have that's what we were talking about in terms of a back catalog or anything like that. You don't have anything that people would want. You don't want to be considered maybe a bot account and you're adding all your friends and you're creating yourself a hashtag and stuff, but you don't have anything. It's like nobody is going to care about that. Like that, so have quality content, have an idea, have something that you are willing to share. And this is, I think, one of the key things there is that be willing to share, like be bold, be brave, be willing to share it. I think we had an episode of CSS about that, where, I'm really reticent to put something out until it's the same metaphor as, I always think that I need to go back and get another degree. Right.
Oh my God. Don't do it. Don't even say that.
I know. No. And trust me,
Don't do it. Don't do it.
No. I won't, I swear. But that's basically my thing. And it's like, be bold, be brave, put something out there, get responses to it. You'll, get enough reactions one way or another, and you'll figure out what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. But you have to have quality content first. So that has to be your, starting off point. Then our second step that we were kind of talking about was defining your audience. Like, who are you talking about when you talk about engaging with your audience? Or who are you trying to talk to? Who are you trying to get reactions from? Who are you trying to show your really cool project to? That kind of stuff. And then kind of a subset of that, whether or not this is considered step 2. I think it's a meaty enough thing to be step 2 in and of itself, but I'll let you kind of decide that. But step 2 is kind of like figuring out where your audience interacts. How do you reach them? How do you, we are a more connected society now than we ever have been ever before. People used to write letters to each other. Nobody does that anymore. No. And you don't have to do that, so it's, if you were, in the Civil War and you wanted to communicate something back home, you had to mail a letter that went in somebody's shoulder bag while they were riding a pony. We don't do that anymore. So now you can reach out to your audience in any number of ways. Is your audience the type of people who primarily use email, and therefore like an email listserv would probably be the best way to reach them? Do they interact on kind of more youthful mediums like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? I mean, Twitter is just like a garbage fire.
No, it all depends on your target audience. So you spent some time defining your target audience, but where do they live? So let's say you're a dance instructor. You're going to be posting dance instructing videos on MySpace. Are you going to be like a cool dancer on TikTok?
Right?
Like really aligning your audience with the proper platform and what content you can create to really engage in the right audience. So you're not forcing a giant rock uphill. It's a smaller rock. You're still pushing uphill, but it aligns more with you and your message and what you're trying to accomplish.
You're basically figuring out the perfect combination for the right medium for your message and where your audience lives.
Right.
Like basically figuring out where your audience lives, and specifically how does your message or your product or whatever come through on that medium.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I didn't even, because I was thinking about like, dance instructor, same thing, YouTube, Instagram, but it's like, man, yeah, it's a medium that I wouldn't even think about because it's not, the kind of posting that I'm interested in or where I think my audience lives. But yeah, TikTok, of course.
Yeah, it's TikTok.
Yeah, so it's finding the right medium for your message and for your audience. That's essentially what it is. Okay. Step 3, establish a cadence, or in our case, like we're referring to it as a schedule. But basically establish a cadence for your content that, makes it, it has to be a very accomplishable. I think that kind of ties back to SMART goals, right? Specific, realistic, all that kind of stuff. It's like your schedule has to be accomplishable. Like you have to actually be able to hold that schedule and not falter or not, because that you have to be consistent and you have to be craveable in that sort of sense. Like, yeah,
so start small. I would recommend starting small, even if it's once a week, twice a week. Don't go big. You don't have to post 7 days a week, twice a day. You can post once a week and just start small. Just, get into the groove of it, because it's going to feel overwhelming if you agree to do 7 days a week, twice a day type of thing.
Right. And also, I mean, what you might find out is that a little might go a long way. Like if you post 3 times a week to whatever mediums, maybe even different mediums, so that you're hitting a different medium once a week or something like that, that may end up going a whole long way. So there's no sense in burning yourself out or making things too complex. Make a schedule, or essentially what you're saying is make a cadence and a schedule that you can really stick to, build that consistency and build that reliability with your audience, and that they know where to find you and when.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay. Step 5, curate your content according to your schedule and according to your audience.
Right. So, do you want to do dance videos? Do you want to do quote posts? Do you want to do pictures? Do you want to do vlogs? Do you want to do live streams? Do you want to do just retweet other people or repost other people's things? Do you want to do interviews with people on wherever you'll do your interviews, just like what kind of content do you think would resonate best with the audience you're trying to build, the audience you've defined, and the audience that you found on these different platforms? Like what aligns with all those things? And this is where the quality comes in. Like it has to be good. It has to be good quality content. Otherwise, people are going to not take it as seriously as you'd like them to.
Right. Yeah. And that's sort of, I think that probably there's a whole lot of different ways to interpret that, but even people's TikToks and stuff like that, we have all the tools, right? We have all the tools. We have an iPhone that can record in 4K. I mean, there's no reason, and if you just do a little bit of searching, it's like how you and I in the previous episode both we're talking about Canva, but to totally different people. But it's because we had the same idea of like, oh, I want to post this and I want to, whatever. It's like all the tools are out there to make your content high quality and very professional. Just do the digging and do the background research to figure out how to do that first.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, gotcha. So we've got a nice little tight. These are the marketing dance steps.
I think there's like one more step really, and that's going to be the engagement step where we're actually. It's engagement where you're really talking with your audience and conversing with them, but also giving them a way to really get in touch with you. So like at the end of these podcasts, we should probably be doing, hey, everybody, please leave us a review. Yeah. So, we can give them a call to action, or if you want more information, check out our Instagram page. Like it really establish a network of ways to get in touch with you, whether it's through a DM or a comment on YouTube or a podcast review. An email list, let's say you're signing up, you want to build an email list, really find ways to really build up that engagement with your audience that's not overwhelming, but kind of filtered to what's most beneficial to everybody, not just the people leaving hate comments.
Yeah.
Because they don't like your t-shirt, but like leaving like on Instagram, there's a way to leave a how you can leave a comment underneath your picture. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, today I was out grocery shopping and I saw these cool kumquats. It's like, what's your favorite thing at the grocery store? Like leaving a call to action at the end of posts and comments to where people can respond to it and start a conversation. So your engagement is really going to be about starting conversations, providing conversation starters, and providing ways to get in touch with you to have those conversations with individuals, with groups of people.
Yeah.
Whatever aligns most with you.
Yeah. So basically don't expect, if you want to build this great audience and if you want to, build up your product or your podcast or your service or whatever it is, don't expect these sorts of engagements to be, completely one-sided. Like, oh, I posted this thing. Why aren't I getting 1 million likes on it and getting more downloads on my podcast? It's like, well, because this has to be a two-way relationship. We have to make it a conversation. We have to make it something that keeps the audience coming back for more, is that they know how to reach us and they feel like they're, and I mean, that's why it's such a trite word now, or it's so overused, engagement. But that's ultimately what that means, right? Is that they feel like they are heard or represented or something. And that way it's not just me speaking to a wall or me, because that defeats the purpose of having an audience at all. We're all engaging in this. And then this way, the podcast, in a sense, also becomes a byproduct of the people who listen to it, which is then that makes that kind of it drives the product forward in a sense, and it drives your audience forward as well.
Exactly.
All right, I like it. Okay, so I mean, we've figured out our audience, and we've already kind of been talking about some different versions of posting and stuff like that. I think you're right. I think we schedule it out.
Just gotta schedule it out. Plop it in the to-doist.
Oh yeah, you know what? I'm definitely gonna make a section of the to-doist for the podcast that way, because it just makes my life so much better. I love to-doist.